Welcome back to the Puddin' Creek Rod Shop. If you watched last week's episode, you already know what this old car is. You saw us drag it out from in front of an old warehouse in Knoxville, Tennessee. If you didn't watch last week's episode, you're probably wondering, what in the world kind of old car is that? It's not a 40 Ford. It's sure not a 40 Willys, but it kind of looks like one. What is that old car? Well, this is a 1941 Studebaker Champion double-dater coupe. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, Puddin' Creek, gasoline's awful high right now. Why in the world are you wasting gas dragging home an old Studebaker? Well, during the gasser wars of the 1960s, a 1941 Studebaker was one of the warriors. You see, similar to a Willys coupe, a 1941 Studebaker coupe had a short wheelbase, so it was really easy to jack that front end up in the air and transfer that weight back to the back wheels back where you need it. Now I'm about to unload this car and I notice the old tailpipe has fell down. That's going to catch one of the ramps on the way down for sure, so I better cut that off. All right, now we're back in business. All except for this one Marty Feldman wheel. This wheel gave me a fit loading the car, and it's giving me the same fit unloading the car. Now, as you guys watch me unload this car, be thinking about how you would build this car. What engine would you put in it? What transmission? Are we going automatic, B&M, or are we going stick? What rear end would you put under it? Are we going like with a 50 Olds or a 9-inch Ford? How are we going to hang that rear end? We're going to build some ladder bars? What are you thinking? What about the front end? I mean, we all know it's got to have a straight axle, but are we going to fab up a straight axle out of DOM tubing? Or are we going to use a straight axle out of an old 50s truck or a van straight axle? Let me know in the comments how you're thinking this car ought to get built. Now this car is actually not that heavy, and it seems like the wheels all roll okay. There's no brakes locked up, but that one Marty Feldman wheel is giving me a fit. Every time it gets around to a certain place, it must be rubbing the brake backing plate or something, and it just wants to bind up. It's making it a real peel to try to get it into the shop. Well, I finally got it in the shop. I know you boys were thinking, let's load up and drive to Tennessee and help old Puddin' Creek push that car in the shop. He ain't ever going to get it in there by himself. Well, we got the car inside. Now we've got to unload the back of the truck. First thing to come out's the old bumper. The old bumper sadly had been hit at some point, so it's got a big dent in it. Luckily, gassers don't use front bumpers anyway. The front bumper might have got hit, but it didn't touch the hood. This hood is immaculate. It almost looks like an NOS hood. The little woman's out walking circles around the farm, trying to get her 10,000 steps in, so I flag her down and ask her to help me set this front clip off the old Studebaker. The little woman is strong as a bear, but just a small bear. As you guys can see, Puddin' Creek Rod Shop is just about full right now. And having this Studebaker sitting around in model car kit form in 30 different pieces, well, that's just not going to work. So what I want to do this morning is kind of unpack the car, go through all the stuff that's in it, see what we got, see what kind of condition the car's in, the parts are in. And then I want to start assembling some of the body parts back on the car. I want to get the deck lid back on the car. I want to get the seat put back inside of it, and I want to rehang the doors. Mainly just because I don't have enough space to have all those body parts sitting around in my way. Now, I'm just enamored with this hood, and you're saying enamored, that's a $3 word. You really dug deep to find that one, didn't you, Puddin' Creek? Anyway, I'm really enamored with this hood. I mean, the styling, the trim, the nose badge with that big curvy S on it, that's just too cool. The other part of this car I'm just crazy about is the dash. This dash is just super cool. The glove box with the logo on it, the air vent there in the center, the gauge cluster, the steering wheel is just as cool as it can be, the horn button with the Studebaker logo. I mean, this is a super nice dash. When we were buying this car, the seller mentioned to me that he was pretty sure he had an extra set of NOS 1941 Studebaker tail lights. He said they might be buried in his storage. He didn't really know where they were. When he told me this, my eyes really lit up because 1941 Studebaker taillights are one of the most desirable taillights there is for custom cars. Guys mount them vertically, they mount them horizontal, they French them in, they use them on Cadillacs, they use them on Mercurys, just about any kind of custom you can think of. Very highly desirable taillights. When the guy told me he had an extra set of NOS taillights, but he would really have to dig to find them, I told him I would be glad to pay him some extra for the taillights because that was not part of our original deal if he would take the time to find them. So the whole time we were loading this car up, he was digging through his storage, moving boxes, moving tubs, looking in tote pans, trying to find these taillights. He finally finds them. They're not in the storage at all. They're under the carport, kind of halfway out in the weather, not locked up. Anybody could have walked by and stole them at any time. But when he puts the box up on a tub to open them up and to show them to me, he's kind of shocked because they're not NOS. They're just taillights. He had remembered them as being NOS, but he just remembered wrong. He said his neighbor had passed away, and his neighbor restored Studebaker cars. So he went to his neighbor's estate sale, and he bought these taillights for estate sale prices. So I told him, even though they're not NOS, I still want to buy them. How much extra do I owe you for this extra set of taillights? He said, oh, heck, they're not NOS. I'll just throw them in with the price of the car. Let's see what else we can find in the trunk. There's the aluminum seal plates. Boy, those would be hard to replace if they weren't there. There's the door garnish with the vent window, and the other door garnish is still in the door, the guy told me. There's the piece that seals between the two windshield glasses, and it's still got the rear view mirror attached. These are the filler panels that go in between the hood and the front fenders. Sometimes for a gasser, the guy would leave these fillers out, and that'd get you a lot more airflow, and you could look in and see your cool Hemi or Olds Rocket or whatever kind of engine you were running. Here's the inside window garnish for the windshield. For the right-hand side, it's missing. It's a little crusty on the bottom, but it looks really nice on top. This piece would go right here. There's the stainless steel piece that goes on the outside of the windshield divider. I bet that would be a hard piece to find if it were missing. I don't think they reproduce a lot of parts for the 41 Studebaker. The 1941 Studebakers were only made half a year. Studebaker made cars the first half of 1941. The second half of 1941, they switched over to tooling up for the World War II effort to make the big Studebaker trucks. Well, here's a mystery part. I wonder what part of a Studebaker this is. Looks like maybe it came off of a trophy. I'm not sure, but I don't recognize it. If you recognize this part, you know what to do in the comments. Here's the door card trim panel pieces for the inside of the door. They look like they're in really nice shape. All right, now we got the rest of the trunk pan cleaned out. We can see what condition it's in. Looks like there's a few extra drainage holes. That's to be expected when you buy a 1941 car. It's not going to be perfect. The rest of the trunk pan looks pretty solid. It's not that bad. I've seen a lot worse. The main trouble spot seems to be right in front of the trunk pan. Now it's time to unpack the front of the car. The little woman and I, we put the doors and the deck lid and the seat cushion up here. Let's get the deck lid out first. Now I'm taking my time and trying not to scratch it up. I don't want to scratch up the logo, the emblem on the deck lid. And I really don't want to scratch up that green patina. I know a lot of you guys really don't like patina, but I think this patina is pretty cool. We might end up keeping it. Who knows? Anyway, I don't want to beat up the deck lid. I don't want to drag marks into the doors that are below the deck lid, so I'm just going nice and slow. I don't want to ding up the trim on the dash, and I don't want to slam the deck lid into the 28 Roadster sitting here under the plastic beside of it, because it don't have a patina. It's got a paint job. Before I try to bolt this deck lid onto the hinges, I check all the threaded holes because I don't want to find a bad one while I'm laying upside down inside the car trying to bolt it up. Sure enough, some of these holes are a little rough. I'm going to show you a quick fix to take care of that. Just take your bolt and take the corner of a grinding stone and grind a notch right in the end of the bolt. This notch, when you run the bolt back through the threads, this is going to clean any rust or debris out of the threads, and it'll also kind of straighten up any bad threads if they're not real bad. Now you're probably saying, why in the world would I go to all this trouble? I've got a tap set. I'll just run a tap through the hole. Well, a tap cuts, and sometimes you don't want to cut your thread because you might make it oversized. Taps are oversized by the GH number printed on the side of them. Next time you pick up a tap, look at the GH number. That's the tap grind. The number signifies in half thousandths how much bigger the tap is over nominal size. The bigger the GH number, the more oversized it's going to cut your thread, and it might make your thread sloppy. So with a notch cut in the end of your bolt, apply just a drop of oil. Doesn't matter what kind of oil, just some oil. And run those down through your threads. That should clear out and clean up most threads and make them very usable. Now, if you have a thread that's really beat up and banged up, or the threads are stripped or something crazy, you are going to have to run a tap through it or do something more serious. But always try this first, and if this works, it doesn't affect the factory size of the thread at all, and it doesn't make your bolts sloppy. If you end up having to use a tap, start out with a GH2 grind or a GH3. Those won't cut your threads very much oversized. But when you start getting up into GH4s and 5s and 6s and 7s and 8s, those are really going to take a lot of material out of your thread. Now with all the threads cleaned out tip-top magoo, it's time to install this deck lid. I can't wait to see it on the car. Now we got to get these doors out of the way because I need to crawl in here and lay on my back and bolt up the deck lid hinges to the deck lid. Every time somebody sees this big 6-cylinder in the background of one of my videos, I always get a comment, "What's the big 6?" Well, that is a 302 GMC motor with 3 2 barrels, Fenton headers, and fully built inside. Let's check out these doors. I mean, man, they sure look nice. The door latches work freely. I haven't done anything to those. The window crank, hey, it cranks up and down. The glass is still in there. I'm amazed. I'm used to buying old cars with no glass in them, and the window crank mechanism is just froze up solid from rust, if it's even there. I do see one spot on the stainless trim that's got bent in. I hope we didn't do that transporting it. I don't believe we did, but I've got a trick to fix that. I'll show you guys probably in another video. This door latch works free. Man, I'm just super impressed with these doors. I did check the door bottoms as I was taking them out of the car, and they're a little crusty, but no rust-through holes at all, which is highly unusual. These floors are not that bad. They're not perfect by any means. There's some holes in them, but I mean, all in all, they're pretty solid, especially if you ignore that basketball size hole between the floor pan and the trunk pan. But other than that, the seller described these floors as workable. I will have to agree. I believe they are workable. No need to cut these out and completely replace them. I wouldn't anyway. All right, I've made myself a little bed here, and I'm going in. We're going to bolt these trunk deck lid hinges to the deck lid and get this part of the job wound up. Man, you gotta love all the pre-war styling of the emblems and logos and that big curvy S Studebaker symbol on this car. Too cool. The trunk lid handle on this thing works smooth and free. This is a pretty good car, it really is. Now I want you guys to check out this mechanism on the trunk support arm. You raise it up all the way up, and then this ratchet pawl extends, and as you lower it down, the ratchet pawl locks it into place and holds the trunk lid up. To release it, you raise the trunk lid up, flip this lever with your thumb, and then the ratchet assembly just kind of disappears in the track. Really quick, I want to fix this glove box door before I put the seat in, because the seat's going to be in the way of doing that. This glove box door is froze up solid. I'm not sure if it's the latch or the hinges or what's going on, but it won't open and it won't close, and it's partially open. And what I've found in the past is anytime a glove box door is partially open, invariably someone will come along and stick their fingers in it or stick a screwdriver in it and try to force it open, bend up the hinges or the trim. Well, we don't want that to happen. Let's just fix it real quick before we put the seat in and get it working good. All right, we got it on the workbench. Let's figure out what's going on. First thing we're going to do is check the thumb latch. Oh, that works perfectly. No problems there at all. That hinge is completely free. Oh, there's the problem. The other hinge is rusted up solid. Now I've got it cleaned up with a wire brush, but I think I'm going to have to bring out the deep creep for this one. And you're saying deep creep? Is that one of the employees? Oh no, that's Seafoam, deep creep. This is way better than WD-40. It's a little stiff. Oh, wait a minute, she's freeing up. Oh, there we go. The deep creep never fails me. Friends, I had to pull off working on a Studebaker for just a little bit. I got a hot lead on some local drag racing memorabilia. Now, me and all my hot rod buddies, we collect anything connected with hot rods or drag racing, but what we really like is something with a local connection. I washed the grease and rust off my hands and real quick ran up to Kingsport, Tennessee to buy, before anybody else could get to it, what's in this duffel bag right here. Now, I'm really anxious to show you what's in the duffel bag, but let's start with what's under the duffel bag first. Now, I can already read your thoughts. You're thinking it's a Quaker State fender protector. Big deal, Puddin' Creek. Well, look a little closer there. It's not just any fender protector. It's the one you won if you won your class in 1970 at the AHRA Drag Racing World Championships. You see, I've got a real soft place for anything related to AHRA drag racing. Our local track, the Bristol, Tennessee Thunder Valley, that track was sanctioned as NHRA from 1965 to 1967. But then it was sanctioned AHRA from 1968 to 1970. And then IHRA after that. Thunder Valley, or the Bristol International Dragway, that was one of the tracks that my uncle raced his 1941 Studebaker gasser at. The article underneath this old newspaper clipping from the 60s says he was preparing to go to the AHRA event at the Bristol International Dragway. I know. Come on, Puddin' Creek, enough with the history lesson. Show us what's in that duffel bag. You see, the gentleman I bought this stuff from, his dad had set a world record in 1970 at the Rockingham Dragway, driving a Sunbeam Tiger. Now, the seller told me that he'd often go visit his father when his father got up in years and not doing so good health-wise. And his father would tell him, son, somewhere in this house, there's a whole stack of brand new t-shirts and jackets that I saved from my racing days back in the late 60s. And every time his father would tell him this, his mother would chime in and say, no, there's not. I threw all that junk away years ago. Well, as life goes, eventually his father passed away, and then a little bit later his mother passed away, and then the son was stuck with the task of cleaning out his parents' house. Well, he got to the garage, and out in the garage there was an old dresser that was turned around backwards with the drawers facing a wall and pushed up in a corner, and junk and a few tools laying on top of the dresser. So he drags the dresser around where he can open the drawers, and in all the top drawers are just old clothes and junk. And in the bottom drawer, he finds another pile of old clothes. But underneath all the old clothes, he finds what I'm showing you right now. You see, his dad was right after all. Now, I'm super stoked to get those Bristol 1969 t-shirts. One of them even still in the original plastics, never even been opened up. I feel sure my uncle probably raced the 1941 Studebaker gasser there at the Spring Nationals in 1969. That would have been his exact era. Could have even been the race that the newspaper clipping was from. Who knows? And then the crazy part is all this shows up on my workbench on the exact day that I'm working on a 1941 Studebaker of my own. I don't think these jackets have ever even been out of the plastic, but somehow or another, this one got some gold paint spilt on it. I'm imagining they were laying around the race shop, and a sign painter guy came in to letter the car, and he spilled a little one-shot paint on the uniform here by accident. I have no idea. I just made all that up. But that's what I'm going to tell my hot rod buddies when they come in the shop. I need something to give them a good ear beating about. Now look at these STP jackets. Reminds me of another race car driver sponsored by STP. He drives those funny colored blue cars. Can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But if I remember my NASCAR history correctly, I think it was the mid to late 60s that NASCAR banned the Hemi engine. And that guy that drives those funny colored blue cars, he decided to go drag racing for a couple of years. I wonder if he ever wore one of these STP jackets. Well, that was a lot of fun and a pretty good break. But break's over, let's get it. I want to get this glove box door mounted back in the dash and make sure it's closing properly now. Well, that's our show for this week. We appreciate you guys coming back every Monday to see what we're working on here in the Puddin Creek Rod Shop. Leave us a comment and tell us what projects you're working on. Don't forget to subscribe if you hadn't already. We'll see you next week.